and we recommend at least a 14 gauge wire for that, but it's just a 2-wire system. And it does include the power plug with the base station, so if you were to buy bulk cable, you can always terminate the plug yourself. It's very simple. It's just a screw design, and you would just screw the positive wire to A and negative to B. All right, so like I kind of mentioned, the real only requirements or basic requirements are going to be, of course, you should have the antenna installed and just need to run the Ethernet to the data port and then attach the power. So those 3 things alone, that's the main requirements. If you do that out of the box, it should be plug and play. It should connect to the cloud EPC. It should activate, and subscribers should be able to attach. So those are the main requirements. I did note that by default, the data interface is in DHCP client mode. So we also include a management interface, which is basically for on-the-bench configuration, and we have an IP address for that as well. For outdoor installs, it's pretty basic, just attach GPS. We do include all the lightning arresters for the antenna and GPS. We include the weatherproofing tape, and I believe we're including the ground wires too. You might have to get your own depending on the length and whatnot, but anyways, it's pretty straightforward from the install standpoint. All right, and now starting here, then I kind of wanted to review the web GUI configuration. So if you're to log into the web GUI, this is going to be what you see on the main page. And I kind of wanted to list the steps of the startup process. So, and I kind of number them as you'll see. So as soon as the UNOB turns on, the software is started, the first thing it's going to do is establish an IPsec tunnel to our cloud EPC server. So for step number 1, you'll see IPsec status connected. If that is ever disconnected, then the reason would be you have no route out to the internet. Would normally be the issue, but for the most part it should just be up connected. Then it's going to register to the MME. For those that don't know, an MME is one of the subcomponents of the EPC, but you could think of it as the same. So it's going to connect up as soon as IPsec is connected. The third part is it will check for the synchronization. So I wrote it by GPS. By default, GPS is enabled. So if you don't have a GPS antenna attached, which you would not want to do, for example, you're just setting it up on the bench, you wouldn't attach the antenna. It's going to actually detect that the GPS antenna is not installed. So it will just basically disable GPS, say unsynchronized, and then go straight to step 4, which is to turn the air interface on. In some cases, if you install the GPS antenna outdoors, it might take a little time to synchronize. So there's some cases where the IPsec and MME can be connected, but the GPS is still synchronizing. So if that's the case, the cell status will be inactive until the synchronization is complete.
Don't you have to send the serial number of the eNode base station to support before this is started?
No. So if you've dealt with support before for the OMC console, you actually have the ability to add the serial number yourself, and we'll talk about that later. But as far as the EPC registering to the cloud EPC, there's no requirement for activation on your end, right? The serial number is only for accessing it by the management console.
Hey Jesse, just make sure to remind people that there may be some base stations out there that were improperly band configured and what to do in that case.
Yeah, I think for the most part that, I think it was the first 70 base stations or something, like the very first ones that were sent had the wrong config uploaded by the packaging team. So I don't think that's an issue, but I guess because you know that. So basically this page, so I kind of wrote the band details. So for those that don't know, we have band 42 and band 43. For the ones Patrick was mentioning, you just have to reapply or resave this page if the wrong config was entered. But anyways, so just for everyone to know, the RF filter on the ENOB itself is tuned between 355 and 37. So the base station is basically designed and CBRS ready at this point. So we're just waiting for the FCC laws and all that to finally take place. But for now, band 43 is going to be the only option, since all we can legally do at this point is from 3.65 to 3.7. The other note is I mentioned that the EIR FCN, this is a number, and I'm mentioning it because there's a procedure called PCI lock on the subscribers. So when you connect a subscriber to the base station, you can actually lock it to a specific cell, and it requires two parts. It requires the EIR FCN, which is that first number by the frequency. LTE uses a different number to determine what the frequency will be, and they call that EIR FCN. The other number it will ask for is PCI. So PCI stands for physical cell ID. This is you could think of it as an SSID. It's how the subscriber can identify the base station. I did note that we have 10 and 20 megahertz available for channel bandwidth, and the ones I highlighted are ones that should not be changed. In the future, we will probably just gray those fields out so you can't modify them, and we'll just have an on-off toggle switch for Cloud Core or Cloud EPC. But for the meantime, just know that these parameters are already pre-programmed for the EPC, so if you change them, it will not work.
Hey Jesse, make note too that for those that are in process or about to test the 2.5, make note of the channel settings there.
Sorry, could you repeat that?
Yeah, there's some 2.5 base stations out there now that a good number of people are testing.
Yeah. So, okay, so for band, yes, thank you. Band 41 is for 2.5. So anyone that has a 2.5 license, this basically what I wrote here is for what most operators are going to deal with, which is the 3 gigahertz band. But for anyone that has 2.5 spectrum, it would be called band 41.
And what are the channel sizes on that?
Channel sizes are still, so they're supposed to be 5 and 15. That will be added, I believe, in the next software. So, but it's the same. So it's 10 and 20 for right now.
Okay, there's a couple questions are already coming in, and if we can, we can get to some of these as we go. This one's from John. Will the PCI ever be editable, enabling us to name sectors similar to a traditional SSID?
Well, it is editable. It's just a number. It's not a text field, right? So that's really the only difference is it's using numbers instead of text. Sorry. We found if we change the PCI number, Casper, I'd have to deal with you maybe offline because that's something I've never heard of yet. But changing PCI number and rebooting should not cause any MME to drop. And that's the other thing to note too, is when you apply settings, for the most part, you have to reboot, at least with the current software. So just no change in frequency and whatnot. Even if it doesn't remind you to reboot, you'll want to reboot for the changes to take effect.
It's not a bad idea if we could get the PCI field to be alphanumeric and not just numeric. I don't know if that's possible or not.
You'd be out of LTE standard if you did that.
There we go. Once again, bumping up against trying to stay standard. Okay.
Yep. Yeah, I think everyone knows for 2.5, they're chunks of 15 and 5s or somewhere around there. So yeah, that's definitely going to be a requirement for 2.5. I'm going to move to the next slide. All right. Let's see. Okay, so I kind of skipped a couple fields that I wanted to explain separately. One of those is subframe assignment. In the drop-down, you'll have an option of 2 and 1. I have an image here that basically shows the frame structure in LTE for TDD LTE. But basically, we kind of summarize it as if you select 2, which is the default setting, that there'll be a 3-to-1 ratio, meaning 3 on the downlink and 1 on the uplink. So if you look at 2, you'll count that there's 6 downlink subframes and 2 uplink subframes. So that, this frame basically shows how that structure is. Now there's also a special subframe, the SS, and that frame can do download too. So even though if you did it, for example, you leave it at default 3-to-1, you're actually also using the special subframes for downlink as well. So it's never, so when you go to a 1, a 2-to-2, it's not going to be exactly even. And that's one of the reasons.
Yeah, for those of you that are new to LTE, this is some of the most important information, and it does seem a little bit arcane because it is so new. But this concept of subframe assignment and special subframe are really, really important to understand, because when you're firing up your radio on default settings, some of you may notice, gee, my uplink isn't what I had hoped, especially if you're trying to serve commercial customers or something like that. So if you take this chart and look at it, you can see what assignments you may want to try to play with to increase that upload.
Okay. Yeah, so pretty much hit that. And you'll notice that each special subframe is every time the UNOD will switch between downlink and uplink. That's when the special subframe happens. Anyway, so I kind of listed the peak data rates here as an example. 2-1 means subframe assignment of 2, and 7 is the special subframe pattern, which we'll discuss in the next slide. So actually, let's do that now. So special subframe pattern, we have 7 and 5 as the option. And really, the easiest way to think of it is this is what you're setting as your guard period. The shorter the guard period, the better throughput you're going to get, because there's going to be more resources dedicated to downlink. I also listed the theoretical distance limit for each subframe pattern. Now, the thing to note, though, is LTE has many parameters that affect distance. So, this isn't like just a simple ACK timing. There's going to be many parameters, which we're not going to really get into for now, or we can go in the QA later. But basically, this is, just think of it as your guard period. Actually, we currently have a limit of technically 14 kilometers that we're working with Intel on. Some operators are claiming they kind of are having issues past 11 kilometers, but that's something that we're working on currently to resolve. But we'll move on to the next topic, but just know that this is one parameter that affects distance.
Yeah, and to put some meat on the bone of we are working on it, you guys should know, so for these base stations, for these eNode Bs, we use an Intel chip, which is rather unusual, but we have the source code for some layers of that chipset, but don't yet have the source code that gets us down into some of the really nitty-gritty settings, like changing distance limitations and numbers of active users and that sort of thing. However, Jesse and I learned a few days ago in Dallas that we will shortly, and by shortly I mean we are told we'll get it this month, the complete source code for all layers of that chipset from Intel, which will make us one of the only companies in the world trusted with that. But once we have that, we'll have the ability to modify those more deeper sort of layers inside the chip.
Okay. I believe someone asked about the frequency range. I already mentioned that in the last slide that the RF filter is actually tuned between 355 and 37. But currently, of course, everyone's only licensed that has the NN license for 365 to 37. So even though it says band 43, I guess the answer would be you can technically, if you unlocked it, you could technically select any anything in that range, but the filter only supports a certain range. Tom, no, it won't increase the distance. Like I mentioned, there's a lot of other parameters that affect distance, not just this. This isn't the parameter that's affecting the current distance limitation. All right, this one doesn't really need to be covered too much. It's pretty self-explanatory. This would be the page for configuring the network information. So just so you know, the WAN, it's going to be renamed in the next web GUI. The WAN is that data interface, so all the traffic would route through this interface. The LAN is just for the management. You don't need to add any route. Actually, we found issues that if you add a gateway to the management interface, it's caused some kind of flaky issues that we're trying to figure out still. I'll just move on to the next page. All right, so this LGW, this one I wanted to cover a little more here. So basically, LGW stands for Local Gateway, and this is something that we're doing that's pretty unique compared to the other vendors in that we're rerouting traffic, we're separating the user and control plane. So basically, you could think of LGW as it has the functions of a gateway for the air interface. So basically, we have NAT in router mode. By default, to be plug and play out of the box, it's going to be in NAT. So every subscriber that would attach would have the same, have the same source IP as the WAN IP of the base station. So that's to be plug and play. Most operators today will probably change that to router mode so that they can actually route directly to the subscriber. The other thing of note is some people are confused with the LGW IP pool, what to enter there. You actually want to enter the first IP address that's usable in the subnet, not the subnet address. Currently, one of the issues is we only can do a /24 at the moment. That will be, we'll have up to probably /29 in future updates, but right now it's difficult to put public IPs in the LGWI pool just because of the large net mass. So at least today we're recommending people to use private IP addresses. And then the last part of that is you can add or set statically an IP address for each subscriber, but based on the IMSI. So one difference with LTE is it doesn't pass, the subscribers will not pass the MAC address. So you have to do it by IMSI for this case. And we'll talk a little bit more about that on another slide too. But for the most part, it's pretty simple configuration. It's just currently we only support NAT in router mode. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Okay, so this is kind of shows the mapping of what an ICMP request would look like for both NAT and router mode. So for those that understand networking, it should come pretty simple. But one thing that I should explain is that you'll notice that the source IP in these examples from the CPE will be a 172.16 address. What's different with LTE here is the EPC has to give the subscriber an IP address. We have no control, of course, as the operators, because the EPC is in the cloud, it's managed by Baicells. So you have no control of what that address is going to be. So that's where LGW comes in. LGW will actually change the IP address of any subscriber. So if we look at router mode, you'll notice that 172.16.0.10, for example, is retranslated to 10.10.0.10, which you'll notice from the last slide, 10.10 is the default network, 10.10.0. So basically that's what we have to do. We have to retranslate all the IP addresses to make it work in the fixed wireless network that most operators have. Okay, so let's move to the next one. All right, so we'll go back to the LGW a little bit later too, but the next thing I want to talk about is just review the whole cloud core onboarding and management procedure. So we actually just launched today, and we're finalizing that, but we have a new URL for the cloud core on our website, and we have a form there which new operators can fill out. So up until now and still currently, people are just emailing us, which is fine as far as, hey, I'm a new operator, get me set up. We're just trying to make that easier by putting up a form. In the future, we'll also just have an automated onboarding procedure where subscribers can do that themselves, but currently we have to manually add every operator. But yeah, it's pretty, yeah, so basically just go to this URL and look for, or you can just find it on our website and look for the form. Activating SIM cards, we're still asking that people send us a list to support.ma@baicells.com. And so basically we need to activate all the SIM cards. The ones that you purchase from the distributors, they're added, but they need to be activated. So before you can use them, please send us a list so we can activate them to your account.
Hey Jesse, Bob has a question on concurrent and active numbers at this point.
Max number of customers you can have on each sector. So technically, and trying to remember if the next software is coming out, but basically the most that would ever be supported on our base station is going to be 96 users. I think for most operators, if they're doing 10, 20 meg download packages and you figure out your oversubscription ratio, you're usually going to be around 40 or 50. So it really depends on your internet packages, but if you're doing anything that's somewhat high, you're probably not going to want to add a whole lot of subscribers to each sector or base station.
But I think the question revolved around active limitations.
Yeah, the actual physical limitation would be 96.
On active right now?
Oh, sorry, the next one. Actual active is 32. So I'm thinking in the next month we'll have a release where we can support 96 active and connected.
But also I think it bears mentioning that when we think of things like active and total connected users, as humans we think of actors of 32 people sitting there in front of their computers. From a computer standpoint, obviously that's not active. So if you're reading a web page or whatever, that's not active. Active is actually executing some sort of command or something. So it seems like roughly maybe 1 in 5 people that are connected at a given time might be active. So the 32 should probably be okay for a good while, although we are working to get that setting lifted up to 96 as well.
Sure. Okay, I'm just glancing at the other questions here. Seems like a lot's coming in.
Yeah, every once in a while I'll catch up on these chat questions.
Sure. So Keith mentioned there's no rate limiting. Yes, so I think every operator of ours knows that currently there's no rate limiting, at least on the LTE physical layer side. That's going to be coming soon. I was hoping by now we would have that. We had some stability bugs we wanted to fix, and we made that a higher priority. So we had to push back the rate limiting software update a bit. So I don't have an exact ETA, but other than within a month.
Yeah, for those that don't know, so there is a major update that's actually in process right now, and what they did a number of days ago, it's almost been a week, they upgraded a batch of 7 base stations, and all the operators that have it know who they are, and then they're monitoring that for a week. And if all goes well there, they'll do another batch, I think, of 36, and then they'll monitor that for a week. And if all goes well, then they'll do a global and get all the rest. So that's a process that'll take a while, but we want to be careful when we do it and not make the mistake that was done once previously, where they did an update and all of a sudden everyone had stability issues, right? So hopefully you can be a little bit patient and we'll get that done.
Yeah. I already asked about disadvantages of address translation. I mean, through the services that we've done so far, we haven't had any issues. Because we're changing the IP address going out and back, I don't think the services even know that there's going to be any, change there. So there's not really any issues that we found yet. And then I already asked what's preventing Baicells operators from doing self-service. Well, nothing really. So if you had band 41 or 2.5 gigahertz, there's mobile phones that support this band. So it's more of what's out there for UEs. For 2.5, there's a lot of UEs phones. A lot of phones will support band 41. Band 42, 43, and we're talking about 3 gigahertz, that's still catching up. There's phones being, in the works being made to support this band, but there's not anything out there today. Today, all the UEs would be for fixed wireless, currently for 3 gigahertz and LTE.
Right. So in other words, there's nothing inherent in the technology that prevents mobile use. It's more about a market availability and a regulatory issue than anything else. So this is standards-based LTE, and given that, it is capable of supporting mobility.
Yep. I'll just answer one more and then we'll go on. But John, you had one about the PCI locks on the UEs that actually there's a bug with the UE. If you change the subframe, sometimes they need to be power cycled. So that's actually a known issue internally. So with a CPE update, then that will fix that issue. Okay. We'll do questions later on too, so I'm just going to go to the next slide. All right, onboarding. So actually, technically, for some that maybe you didn't know, if you already have your own OMC login, you can go and add the serial number yourself to have it pop up in your account. So I kind of listed the steps here, but basically you go to the devices menu and you click the add button, enter the serial number, and then it will show up. So it's not going to show any details until the base station or CP actually comes online, but at least it'll list it. Okay. And you can configure, there's some basic configurations by right-clicking, go to settings. There's some other options too, but this just shows you a quick screenshot of just showing that you do have the options to configure the equipment using the OMC as well. Yeah, I think we can make them longer, Jeff. Okay, let's move on. All right, so basically, so far we covered the base station configurations. I didn't get time to add everything for CPEs. We can maybe do that in another webinar. There's not really much for those that haven't done any CPE installs yet. It's pretty straightforward. You just simply insert the SIM card once it's activated and power it on and align it, and it will connect up. You don't need to think about passwords, find out what the SSID is or anything like that. So I think actually, installations of LTE subscribers from the installer standpoint can be actually quite easier than with Wi-Fi. Anyways, let's move on to layer 2, which I think is what everyone keeps asking us about. So,
hey, and Jesse, and as you have this conversation, preface it with some of the issues with both LTE and layer 2 and capacity impact and all that kind of stuff. So talk through those things.
Sure. All right. Yeah, so I touched on a little bit about it, but LTE was, designed initially for mobility, and that there'd be basically a central gateway, and it doesn't really mesh with what fixed operators are doing. And with basically, a gateway was required with LTE to be basically support the LTE standard. And you know, most operators with fixed wireless are wanting to bridge everything to pass public IPs and whatnot. So that network doesn't mesh with what LTE is doing. So with LGW, you know, what we've done so far, we've done that as a method to be able to basically have the functions of a gateway, being able to NAT and route, but layer 2 is not, or no one's done this, at least to any of our knowledge, as far as anything natively. So basically what people are doing now, or other vendors with LTE, is they're doing some kind of VPN over the top, or VPLS on layer 2.5, right? There's no native bridge function. So, you know, currently the solutions are, we'll do, you know, VPN over the top, for example. So we actually have some operators overseas that have tested this option here. For anyone that's not familiar with VXLAN, I wrote the more technical description, but basically encapsulates layer 2 frames into layer 4 UDP packets. So VXLAN is kind of growing to be very popular among cloud infrastructures and connectivity, but for some operators we have tested using the VXLAN protocol, and it's actually worked. So basically I just wanted to explain that this is one solution for layer 2. We have plans to implement the VXLAN support for future CPU software. So for anyone that does this in the future, basically it's going to be a lot easier. Currently, if you want to do this option, the subscriber would have to install this on their router, which the operator would most likely do for them using OpenWRT. OpenWRT is the only software we know that natively can support VXLAN. So at least for the operators we've tested this with, we would install OpenWRT on the customer's router. So the next, and then basically, yeah, I mentioned here too, so, and then you need a VXLAN server, so you just put that in your NOC somewhere on a Linux server. So this shows basically the diagram of how this would work, or what it would kind of look like. So if you have LGW in router mode, as an example, and we're using the cloud EPC, basically it says office router, but the option up here would be if our subscriber supports built-in VXLAN, which it doesn't today, but will soon. The option that would have to work today is where it says Office B. You'd have to have the VPN or some router you'd have to have that supports VXLAN. And then VXLAN is going to create that layer 2 tunnel to the VXLAN server, which would basically create a bridge to your NOC.
Okay, you can't just drop it. It will soon. What do you mean by that in the CPE in terms of supporting it soon? You talking about a different CPE, or current CPEs?
The CPE software will. Right. Currently, the ETA I was given was end of year, but you know, we'll see. So that's the current estimate. But the new CPE software is going to be a complete overhaul. It's just as big or bigger than the large V software update that's upcoming. So anyways, this is, at least today, if someone was to try a layer 2 solution, they'd have to support a VXLAN server and a router that supports VXLAN. That would be the solution today. Now, obviously that's not ideal because subscribers are going to need a specific router to make this work, and then you're going to have to add a VXLAN server to support it. So it really depends on your situation. If it was a for sure requirement that you had to do this very soon, then this is definitely an option, and we can provide instructions on how to do this. Okay, I'm sure a lot of questions are coming in. So yeah, exactly, Justin. So Microtech with version 7 that was supposed to come out a long time ago, but yeah, they've been talking about VXLAN. So it'd be really good if Microtech supports VXLAN. This would make it a lot easier too.
So guys, there are a lot of questions that have been jumped over, but don't worry. At some point here, we'll back up to the very beginning and make sure that we've hit every single one. Okay?
Yep. Yeah, there's a lot of questions. Let me go to the second option here. So we do have an option 2 for layer 2, which I think you guys will like. Option 2 is we add bridge support to LGW. This is obviously the most ideal. It's just you simply select bridge mode. We have to do a lot of programming on the back end to support this, and as you can see, we have an ETA of early January is actually the ETA for that. But this would be the most simplest solution. So what we have to do here, though, to support this is in LTE, and I mentioned this before, the air interface does not pass MAC addresses. So we have to actually generate one. So we came up with a method to just simply generate a locally administrated MAC address, depending on what the IMSI is. And we can provide a tool so that you can generate and understand what this is. And anyways, this is in the works. We've tested it actually internally, and it's worked with some very alpha-ish software. And so the programmers are currently working on implementing this now. Okay. But yeah, basically this diagram does show, the translation as far as, here's the IMSI, here's the IP that I got from the EPC on the CPE, and then it changes the source MAC or adds one. And so basically it's exactly what LGW is doing now, except we're generating a MAC address. And we're adding a DHCP relay in a way. So anyways, I think this would solve basically everyone's need for layer 2. But the VXLAN, like I said, will also support that natively in the future as well. And if anyone wants to try that, they can let us know. We're working on documentation now that includes an install guide as far as how to make that happen. But at least that's what we have for now. And then LGW, I think, is going to be the ideal solution for later.
Yeah, and I'd like to make a comment here about layer 2. So we know that for many of you, this is one of the single most gating features to really beginning to scale, right? Because if you enable this, then all the other things that you might want to do, your own rate limiting integration into other packages, power codes, sonars, these kinds of things, at least once we generate APIs, become easy to do. So we've been beating down their door, and they've been beating down our door, and what we've just been struggling with is trying to figure out the most effective way to do this, because some of the implementations of layer 2 across LTE that have been done out there come at a major performance penalty. In some cases, I understand about a 30% capacity hit, and that's something we clearly want to avoid, right? No one wants to do that. So there has been some, I think, reasonable time taken trying to figure out the ways that make most sense to do this. But they know that we can't hit as a team their revenue targets for us in the absence of this being fully implemented. So from an investor standpoint, they're telling them hard to get this done, right? So this is a P1 top priority sort of thing, and it will happen. And I'm confident that that I don't have to hedge too far on that ETA.
Sure. All right, let's move on. And yeah, I guess that was really kind of getting towards the end of the slides here. But yeah, really it was just more of an overview of the setup for helping a lot of the new operators, and then basically discussing here's our layer 2 options. So of course, we ask that you follow us on Baicells, our Facebook and Twitter.
Yeah, and there's also yeah, exactly. And there's we have a Friday newsletter that goes up. Basically, we've been calling it our Friday update. That's been exclusive to trial operators, but I've given the order basically to open that up more publicly to any who are interested in getting access to that. So you should see links to register for that update going up on the various Facebook pages. But we also have these other forums that I'd like kind of Jesse to walk through. And maybe, Jesse, you could go online on the forum and kind of go through some of the stuff that we've already put in there and how people use it, because Matt told me, for example, that it might be kind of clunky, and maybe even explain how things work through our Zendesk app and support, so everyone has a complete picture of how these things work, and then we can go back. We'll answer all these questions one by one, and then we'll kind of I'll dare to open up the mics, and we'll have an open audio exchange if we can manage that without too much background noise.
Sure. Yeah. So basically, like it says, we actually just launched it last week. Actually, the community forum. The Facebook group's probably the strongest right now, just because we've had it for a while. But we're going to be trying to help push people to use community forums since it's a little more organized there. And then, of course, for any issues that you need help with directly from us, just email support@Baicells. And basically, like Patrick mentioned, we're using Zendesk now, so we have a pretty slick ticketing system that we can better keep track of everything and then keep you informed of the status as well. Actually, the forum is, I haven't had, I've spent a little time on it. We just launched it last week, but we're kind of still advertising our free Cloud Core EPC access for anyone that doesn't know. But basically, like, this is a more modern forum, but it's pretty much structured just like anything else. But yeah, so like I said, we just launched it, so we're still entering a lot of content into it, but I think it's pretty simple and easy to follow.
Is this the one that you said Mimosa uses as well, the platform?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember the name of, Discourse. There you go, Keith. Good job. Sure. So instead of using the older style vBulletin, I thought Discourse would be a little nicer.
Good. Now I know what that charge was that came through our corporate account. Now I know what Discourse is. Okay.
Sure. Yep, but it's free, but we're paying for the hosted charge fee.
What kind of documents do we have in here? So what kind of resources are there?
Yeah, so let me check, because there's actually a knowledge base. So let me just go to Baicells.com. Support. Let me check if that's open yet. So if you go to support, it'll have links to our community. You can actually fill out the support form here as well. That's another option. Let's see. FAQ. Yeah, so this has to be opened up yet. I think we can open it up this week. So we have been adding all the FAQs and documents online, actually, which is part of the Zendesk. But yeah, so I guess look forward to that probably end of week for this to be opened up. But we'll also be posting stuff, of course, in the community as well. All right, and I guess that's for what we have today. I think that's it. So, want to open up Q&A?
Yeah, let's do that. Let's go through. So back up on all the chat and make sure you've hit all the questions that have been asked. I know there's some that were skipped over.
Yep. One thing is Chris asked if SS shares for both uplink and downlink. I think it's very slightly uplink, but it's basically downlink. So all the special subframes are downlink and guard period. So we
Jesse,
Jesse,
Jesse, it'd help if you said the question before you give the answer.
If I said.
Saying repeat the question before you answer.
Yep. Okay, sure. Okay. Yeah, so Bob asked if we can get a PDF. Like I said, that shouldn't be a problem. We can definitely post this online.
Yeah, I'll post that as a document to our Facebook account.
Chris asked about the R filter range for 2.5 gigahertz. I'd have to re-look up the spec sheet on that. I don't know that off the top of my head, but I would assume that it would be the entire band here for the U.S. market, which I think is 2495 to 26, something like that. But yeah, it should
probably goes to 27.
Or 2, yes, 27. Yes, sorry. I guess I'm not sure. Henry asked if the management VLAN is private. There is no VLAN on the management interface. It's just a separate interface. Rob, of course, asked when Bridge Mode will be available. We already covered that early January, at least for LGW's version. And like I said, today we'll have we do have the VXLAN solution. It's just not as easy to set up. Bias to limit subscribers 32. Yeah, so I have to check if this software, we did just send an update recently for SBC 011. I'll have to check if that supports up to 96, but I know with the older software that it was still capped at 32 active and connected. If it is, I don't expect that to be for very long.
Jesse, right above Bob's question, Tom had one that you kind of skipped over, I think. Will there be a way to bind IMSI to IP without having to reboot the ENB?
Currently, if the UE is already attached and then you add it, then you would need to reboot because the UE will not automatically reroute to use the new IP address. Future software, we already have plans to add programming to not require a reboot for this. I think I already covered Casey's question.
Not clearly, I don't think.
Yeah, Casey asked if we run PCI lock on all UE, or he said we run PCI lock on all UEs anytime we make a channel change or a subframe change. It's certain ones, so if you change the channel or the special subframe pattern, for example, there's some cases where like I mentioned before, all the subscribers would need a reboot. This is a bug we actually found in the subscriber CPU software. So that would be part of the big update to fix that issue.
Jesse, they can add different ear FCM numbers, multiple frequencies to PCI lock, correct?
Yeah, it's not a single entry. So if you have multiple Enode Bs you'd want to have the capability to connect to, or maybe for redundancy purposes, yes, you can add more than one.
So couldn't they do all that and then say the default config to load to all their CPs?
I suppose.
And that way they wouldn't have to that way they wouldn't have to input it into each CPE.
But that's going to change. Each space station is going to have a different PCI.
Yeah, I understand the PCI would have to change, but not all the different frequencies.
I suppose you could do something about that. I think it'd be a lot of effort to go in and manage all that, but yeah, it's possible. It might help too, because I mean, there's a lot here. Rick, did you want to just read through and select the ones and read them out?
Yeah.
Yep, I just want to make sure we don't leave anything unanswered.
Artie Darrell from Bermuda. What are the disadvantages is there to the address translation with services like VPN, VoIP, and remote desktop work fine?
Yeah, I covered that one already. I don't think there is, just because the source and destination IP changes, on the sending and returning. We haven't experienced any issues yet with that. So at least to this point, we haven't seen any issues.
So rate limiting is another question. How soon do you think the BOSS server is going to be ready to go?
BOSS server is technically ready to go, but we just haven't launched it publicly because currently the eNodeB software needs to support the rate limiting messages, which is part of the big update that's supposed to be coming out within a month. But anyway, so because that's not supported, it doesn't make sense, because even you set the rate limits, it's not going to do anything. So it'd probably be within a month or so.
Yeah. Am I wrong? Are there not operators already doing some sort of VPLS or bridging with hardware to the UEs and doing rate limiting themselves?
No, I don't think so. I know some operators were putting like a microticker router at the customer site and then doing rate limiting through that. So that's one option. If their router supports traffic shaping, they can just set it up using that method too.
Can you work around on static routes into the OSPF table?
Well, if the router, like say on the tower, has OSPF, you would add a static route, and that would broadcast the static route to all the other OSPF routers. But natively on the eNodeB, we don't support OSPF. Caleb says he's doing rate limiting with power code. I'm assuming he's doing router mode and doing it by IP address then.
Okay, maybe he'll speak up when we turn the mics on.
Yeah, he did. He answered. Yeah, so so if you use router mode and you're doing, if you use router mode, you can then determine what each UE's IP is going to be. So, anyways, so if you have some software like the power code, you can do that with BMU or whatnot.
Will a mass reboot of UEs be available anytime soon?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I guess I'm confused with that question. I did ask the OMC team to add the option to, because currently you can reboot the eNodeB from the OMC, but you can't reboot the CPE remotely. So there'll be options in the OMC to do that, but I think yes, in the future we will have some ability.
Henry has a question of how will we update the live unit, so explain that procedure that we go through. I assume that's a software update.
For which one?
For eNodeB.
The eNodeB. eNodeB firmware updates. The eNodeB firmware updates.
Yeah, so what about it?
His question was, how will we update a live unit?
Oh, how? Oh, so yeah, currently we're doing it through the OMC. So that's how that's done. So anytime new software comes out, we have the ability with the admin account to just remotely. So usually we'll send some posts saying at this time we're going to be updating stuff. We'll probably stop that procedure once the large update comes out, because once we're calling that TR6 internally, or B090. Once that software is updated, that's going to be what internally they deem commercial ready, and at that point we'll unlock the OMC option so that you can also upgrade. We'll also probably add to our website, they're kind of larger downloads, but we'll have a manual option too, which you could, from the web GUI, upgrade the eNodeB software as well.
I'm not sure I understand Casey's question. Is that bug with PCI-subframe on the UE fixable with a firmware update available now? Or is it still in the works?
It's in the works. For the CPE, they haven't been releasing it as much as they have with eNode B. They're like kind of compiling it into one very large update.
Do you have a time frame on that CPE update?
Sorry, what was that?
Do you have a time period on that CPE update?
End of this year. That's at least what they said. I'm actually pushing internally to see if we can get an update before then. But basically, the new update has a whole overhaul of the software and the web GUI. So there's a lot of work to make all that happen, and they're just adding all the bug fixes all together in one. Yeah, I'm pushing internally to see if we can get one sooner. But currently, like I said, end of year is when the big CP software updates planned for release.
Josh Powell and Brian Gray want to know what the expected life cycle of the current ENB platform and how long can we plan to deploy the current equipment. I think you kind of laughed at that earlier, but didn't really answer it. You might talk about the LTE standard and backwards compatibility and so forth.
Yeah, so so LTE, it's built for backwards compatibility. So as the releases progress, there's as far as like the subscriber units, you're not going to have to swap out every single subscriber unit every time you upgrade to the base station. So from that standpoint, yeah, it's all designed for that. As far as lifespan of the eNode B and all that, it really depends. It's really more of the progress of the internet packages you offer. Right, what we offered 5 years ago is a lot different than today. So, and that requires just better, different technologies. So,
such as carrier aggregation, 4x4, 8x8, all that kind of stuff would be hardware changes.
Yeah, those are all mostly hardware. Yep. So those would be hardware changes.
How about SFP as an option on the base stations?
You could use a third-party adapter for that, but yeah,
but when's it going to be integrated into the hardware?
So we're still discussing ETA dates on that, but you could assume that next year the next revisions would of course have SFP.
As well as more space between the N-type connectors and so forth, I believe.
Yes, of course. Yep.
John Keith wants to know, or Keith John, I'm trying to always pronounce his name backwards. Prevents non-authorized users from connecting a CP to our base stations.
I'm trying to find that question too. So
1:34 p.m.
Oh, I have prevents a non-authorized user.
It's basically activated SIM cards.
Yeah, so it's all SIM card based. So the SIM cards are tied to your account, so are the base stations. So if someone tries to connect to your base station, even like another operator's SIM card, it'll actually try to attach, but as soon as it tries the authentication, it will fail and drop.
When will we have the ability to disable a user in the CPE, such as a non-pay customer? Again, that's going to be the boss.
That's part of the boss, correct. So all the subscriber management is through the boss console, which you can assume would be within a month or so would be released. Yeah.
Will we be integrated with Sonar provisioning, and if so, when? I know that's in the works. I haven't got an update on that lately.
Correct.
And
so we're developing
the API.
Yeah, so like you said, we're developing the API currently. So we do have talks with those vendors, and anyways, as soon as the API is finalized, that software can utilize our cloud boss to be able to provision, turn on and off subscribers, set the traffic rates, and that kind of thing.
Can the UBNT EdgeMax be used for VXLAN?
The Ubiquity router I don't know about, but I don't think it natively supports it. I'd have to look it up. But I mean, being based off Linux, you technically could probably install it in the back end that's not supported, but it might work. I don't know.
Is VXLAN kind of a standard? I mean, can you have different brands? I assume you can have different brands of routers and the server.
Yep, that's a standard solution, correct?
Yeah.
So
it's safe to assign public IP. Go ahead.
No, I'd kind of like to go ahead and and kind of open it up. Questions that we've missed, we can get to them if there's no one live, but I see a bunch of people dropping off, and before that happens, I want to make sure and we can get in there and have a dialogue, and then if worst case comes, we can always respond on the Facebook page or something with an answer to these other questions in case we've missed them. But I'd like to at least try and see if we can open this up and have a kind of an open dialogue here, because there's a lot of contributions that I know people can make, and some of them are leaving here. So let's give this a try. Okay, everyone has been unmuted. So the trick is you have control, obviously, over your own mic at this point. So if you'd like to jump in and ask a question or something, or make a comment, go ahead and do it. And if no one is doing that, then Jesse and Rick can continue asking questions or answering questions.
I'm turning the mic on now. The bandwidth or the right one.
That's going to be another month or two out.
I'm not going to throw it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just tell them different rates. Yeah. What do you want? 20 minutes? Sure.
All right. If you're going to ask if you're going to ask a question, please ask a question.
Who's calling now? Somebody's calling you now.
They're not calling me.
Okay, so that wasn't effective. So let me go ahead and Rick and Jesse, you can unmute your mics, and let's try continue and go through questions.
Oh, that was fun.
Sorry, I figured I'd give it a shot.
Yeah, that's where it was.
While you're looking at for where you were, Rick, I'll just kind of browse up too.
Yeah, and I'll say as they're doing that, just again, if you're not on our weekly newsletter, there's a couple ways you can ask for that. One is you can just send a simple email to Savannah.Lancaster, and she'll get you hooked up with that. But I'm also asking her to make a note of it to people on the various Facebook pages. And again, if you haven't been popping around in there's some great stuff that does get posted. Some of the guys just posted a great video that they did the other day on their own from an operator in Georgia, which was quite interesting. So there's pretty good material out there. Go ahead, Rick.
TRO 69 Solutions. Give me some ideas. I'm assuming he's talking about OpenTR 69 or something like that.
Yeah, we actually use TR69 to connect to our cloud OMC server. So you could just change, in the web GUI it's called Network Management Server. So if you just point that to your own TR69 server, then you could technically just use your own. But yeah, we natively do support that.
Is there any reason PPOE won't work with as an option for IP addressing on a customer router?
PPOE, I think you require a bridge for that to work, if I recall. So with bridge mode, you could do it, but it's kind of redundant because you're already doing authentication with EPC, and then once we do the API integration, you'll already have integration with that. But yeah, I don't really see many people trying to PoE.
Can you run 2 UEs that are separated with a foot vertically? I assume two UEs at a client location to get more bandwidth, maybe?
Oh, they're talking about installing them very close. Yeah, so if you install the UEs, nearby, like it's very close, then of course there could be UE interference. So that's kind of, I think, standard with most wireless installs. You want to have separation when you do that. There's no, as far as an exact distance, 6 feet or whatever, but I think just use, good judgment as far as where to install CPEs if they're nearby. With LTE, it's not going to be as bad, though, just because the EPC, or the eNodeB B does control the power, so they're not going to be full blast all the time.
Jessica, can you just go back in the slides to the special subframe slides? The question is, could you go over again the data speeds? Does LTE have any true symmetrical up-down, i.e. 130 megabit total capacity, 65-65 possible, question mark?
No, not really, just the nature of how LTE is. LTE is going to be a lot less throughput on the uplink. You technically could do like a subframe assignment of 0, which dedicates more on the uplink, which I guess you would be then close to the downlink. So we don't support that, but then you're going to be drastically lowering the downlink throughput. So for those that don't understand, the uplink only uses 1 chain instead of 2. So automatically the uplink is going to be half of what the downlink would be normally. And then it uses a different modulation on the uplink to be a little more robust. So then it's going to be a little less slightly on the throughput on the uplink for using that as well. So just overall, the uplink is going to be quite a bit less than what you would get on the downlink. But basically, that equals better non-line of sight penetration too, just because of the different techniques that it's using on the uplink. It sacrifices throughput, but that's why you're getting so much better non-line of sight as well, is because of the nature it's doing the uplink.
Casper asked a question about the upgrading the CPE GUI to respond faster for alignment changes, and I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, just that's in the next CPE upgrade, which is a major upgrade.
Which one is it?
The UE firmware to let them get faster response times on when they're tuning in an antenna and so forth.
Oh yeah, the antenna alignment, yes. So yeah, the new web GUI will even have we're going to have a much faster refresh rate, and we'll also have a dedicated alignment page as well.
And will we get bridge mode in the CPE at that time?
Yes. Yeah, it's going to be a complete overhaul. Obviously, for the ones that have seen the CPE web GUI, it's like based on OpenWRT. We never put any resources on the actual development of it. We just used the generic web GUI. All the engineering's been on the RF side of it, but now we have dedicated people to the web GUI. Yeah, to answer Brian's question quick, Brian just quickly asked about the session times. I think it shows connected time, but I think that is not totally accurate because if it becomes inactive, I have to verify that. But I have made that request to basically add the exact CPU session time as far as how long it's been connected to the base station to be displayed on the OMC. It'll actually be displayed in the eNodeB web GUI too. The eNodeB is getting an overhaul bit as well with the big update, which will actually list all of the subscriber units that are attached. You can go ahead, Rick.
Yeah. Tony asked, how exactly do you log into a UE directly from the NOC?
Yeah,
public. Go ahead.
I can. Yeah, let me pull up something here. We have something called the LGW user guide. So for anyone that hasn't gotten that, let's see. I can pull that up quick. All right. So if you have NAT mode, we actually did add the ability to still access the CPE web GUI remotely. We just added a dynamic port at the end that's generated based on the IMSI number. So actually both modes we do support accessing the CPE web GUI. So this kind of just shows a map of what that would look like. And that's with NAT mode. And then, of course, with router mode, you can just simply route to it, but you use the LGW IP of the CPE.
And he continues with our network. We have public IPs on each of our customer radios. They are in router mode. Our APs are in bridge mode, which are non-routables. I guess that's a comment.
Yeah, so that sounds like a common ISP network setup, right? The APs are bridged. Obviously, currently today we don't have that feature with LGW. We will later, but I mean, if it's a requirement, you have to do VXLAN for layer 2 for now. Otherwise, you'll have to do some workaround with your networking until then.
Can you go back to the slides again, to the interfaces slide?
Where did I put it here? Yeah.
That one. Can you explain adding a VLAN interface and possibly editing the WAN?
Yeah, I think we haven't got a lot of feedback with the VLAN interface. I'm not sure how many people are using it, but I think the idea is more of like for management purposes, to match your network. So if you have a management VLAN, you could add that. The thing though is right now we don't have any firewall rules, so there's no way to restrict like the ports to a certain interface. So from my view, the VLAN's a little pointless at this point just because there's no firewall controls. But technically you could add a VLAN. It's just going to add another virtual interface for that specific VLAN on the WAN interface.
While you're there, using LGW NAT, is there ability to tunnel to CPE access CPU router interface? I think you just said you can do that with that port number.
Yeah.
We have not been able to get router mode to pass traffic on our ENDs. We have tried every configuration we can think of, but we are unable to pass traffic on our network with anything other than NAT. You have any idea what his problem would be? The
My
gateway,
yeah, I mean,
gateway on the WAN?
if the static route's wrong or there's something wrong with the networking, then I mean, for router mode to work, you have to be able to route to that subnet from the network. So if no static routes were created to reach that subnet, then it's, of course there's no traffic. Yeah, I'd have to review his network to understand why.
Question about what the KPI report is in the OMC.
Yeah, so there's an update recently for the KPI, which is just basically it gives you a lot of metrics on the LTE interface and other things. So that's still a work in progress. I don't think it's doing anything right now. So I don't really have a whole lot of details to share just yet. Actually, they weren't even shared with me. They just updated it some days ago. So I have to find out from them what that fully includes.
Is there a plan to increase eNode B capacity with a release update, or do we have to swap eNode?
I don't know if they're talking about capacity, if it's subscriber capacity or throughput, but on the subscriber end, yeah, the 96 will be the most ever. And the throughput, it is what it is for release 9. I don't think there's going to be any updates, to upgrade it past release 9.
Do you support SNMP, and can we monitor the quality from SNMP? I'm pretty aware that the CPEs have SNMP MIBs in them that some users are already monitoring CPEs with. But as far as I know, the eNode Bs will not support SNMP, only TR69.
Yeah, that's in the works for the eNode B. Yeah, the current version does not support SNMP though.
Well, these are just comments, not questions.
Yeah, documentation on TR69. Yeah, Steve Shaw just asked, any documentation on TR69? I guess TR69 is pretty standard protocol, so if you have a TR69 server and you know how to, I guess, do a crawl of everything, it's easy enough to do. But as far as, I guess I'm not sure documentation of what exactly. As far as setting up a server, we don't have anything like that. But basically, we have our OMC, which already has everything, programmed. So TR69 uses our OMC server by default. If you have your own TR69 server, you can just point it to that. There's one parameter in the eNode B to just change that URL, the ACS URL.
Will we support IPv6?
So it's supported technically. There's an IPv6 address based on the MAC address. But as far as networking through the air interface, there's no support for that. So we've been in talks with the software team too about this, and it sounds like it's a lot more difficult than it seems. It's being that it's not just a simple network device. So anyways, it's in the works. We're testing it and trying to find out how we can do it. But I imagine IPv6 would be supported eventually.
It's a TDD system, right? Question mark. Why wouldn't there be a co-located interface? And shouldn't they only talk when told to? Question mark. Does that make sense to you? 221, Brian. 211, Brian Gray's question.
Why would it be Why would there be co-located interference? Yeah, so if they're synced up, they should all be right, talking and listening at the exact same time. So yes, that does of course reduce a lot of interference. But yeah, that's really why you want to sync it up. But there's still going to be, for example, if you have overlaps using the same frequency, a subscriber is going to, have interference from both, base stations. So there's going to be software coming up too that kind of works better as far as handling like reuse one schemes. I don't want to get too much into that, but natively LTE does work like you're thinking, Brian, as far as TDD. But there's still going to be interference if there's overlaps.
Jim has asked this question before, but will we be releasing codes for the SIM cards? I assume so he can program SIM cards himself.
Yeah, we can do that. I'm asking them to also, when we release the BOSS, to let you have the ability to view that, so you don't have to request it from us. But if you have a specific need for that, for right now, you can just email us and we can send you the codes.
What's the target signal strength for the eNode B?
I like to say
neg 94.
Yeah, I think anything 1010 is usually the target. Our hardware team is telling me that it should be 105 or greater, but I haven't noticed a huge drop-off between 105 and 110. But anyways, if that gives you an idea, 110, 15, it's up to you, and it really takes, kind of your own experience to find, what works better, because it's really going to come down to the MCS levels too. So if you're still pulling very good MCS levels at a weaker signal, then maybe it doesn't matter at that point. But generally, the RSRPs are, you could think 105 or 1010 is when you start wanting to think about cutting it off at that point. There's other metrics too, like the SINR, CNR. For the SINR, I think generally 10 is a good number to, start thinking of cutting it off at that point. But we actually show the MCS levels, which I don't think other vendors do. So you can actually see, what you're actually pulling. For those that don't know, 28 MCS is the best you can reach on the downlink, and 22 is the best on the uplink.
Jesse, can we create a table, or do we have a table that shows like the MCS levels and various MCS levels and expected modulation or data rates?
I do. I think yes, I have one. So I was actually planning on, I was planning on putting it on our website. Sure.
Is there a way to add CPE session times on either the CPE or the OMC?
Yeah, we already talked about that. So that needs to be improved, because I think currently the connection time is not totally accurate. But yeah, the accurate time will be added.
So we hit our peak of 83 people on. We're down at 53 still, so there's still quite a few people, interested in this exchange. But we want to move it along as much as possible so we don't take up too much time of everyone's day.
Yeah. Did you say that there's no planned upgrade plan to release 10? I don't think you said that. I didn't hear you say that.
Well, there is of course, but it's, this is not a software-defined radio. So while that's a great thing, those things come at very high cost. So the development choice was made that we are a chip-based eNode B. So we can't natively just upgrade to features like carrier aggregation and stuff like that in this particular piece of hardware, I do not think. Jesse, you can correct me on that. But there's...
yes.
Yeah, so eventually things like Release 12, which has another host of major new features of LTE, those will be something that'll come in a later version hardware product.
All right. I'll hit a couple questions here quick too from a little bit down below. But Henry asks, anyway, to apply QoS on the eNote B. In LTE, we use something called bearers, which currently with LGW, we can only support the default bearer. So there's no special QoS settings that can be applied, at least today. That will also be updated to support multiple bearers. So, the answer would be soon, I guess. We can do different QoS, but if you have your own EPC, then you don't need to use LGW, and you can just natively support the standard LTE bearers. So, using our cloud core, the answer would be not right now, and then if you have your own core, then yes.
And if they're using their own core, they change the MME address. What's one of those fields that you said don't change? And,
yeah, I highlighted those ones, right? So if you have your own core, you just change the MME IP to be the IP address of your core. You change the PLMN to match the SIMs on that core, and the cell ID, of course, and TAC.
And explain to them that they have the option to keep the control plane and the data plane separated using their own core or combining them.
Yeah, that's part of LGW. So LGW has to be enabled with the cloud core because it separates the user traffic. And you can use this with your own core, but if you disable it, then it will work in the traditional sense where all traffic will go to the EPC. If you were to disable this with the cloud core configuration, actually the users won't get any traffic because our EPC will drop any user traffic to it. But typically, if you have your own core, you may just disable this so it works in the traditional sense.
I think we're down to about the last question, which is the special frame or subframe assignments the reason that I'm seeing higher latency on our LTE connections as opposed to the latency we see on our standard 5.8 connections?
I think you're talking about Wi-Fi. Yeah, so it's just trying to think the best way to answer that. It's TDD for one, but basically, if I can go back, I'll just go back to the frame and try to explain it. So the frame here, as we can see, we have downlinks, uplinks, special subframes, and whatnot. So if we have a downlink, you can see that each frame is 1 millisecond, actually. One subframe, actually this is wrong. One subframe should be 1 millisecond, and the whole frame is 10 milliseconds. But generally, by the time that you do a round trip packet, it usually equals, I think with ours, we're around, let me think. I think we're seeing around 35, 40 milliseconds. Maybe others can correct me, but I think it's around 40. But yeah, so each subframe, it can only talk to 2 subscribers. So if you have a schedule, like if there's a bunch of subscribers lining up trying to communicate, they're going to have to wait their turn. That's just how LTE works, to be fair. So anyways, but the thing with the latency with LTE, though, is that's very robust. The jitter is very low. So compared to like Wi-Fi, where there's not much control over that, the jitter can be all over the place. LTE is going to be very steady.
Okay.
Yeah, latency is normal, Casper.
On the OMC, what's the difference between RSP1 and RSP2?
The 2 chains.
one's download, one's upload.
No, the two chains, right? So it's a 2x2 radio on the download.
Oh, yeah. One, okay.
But I think you skipped Garth's about the CBRS too. So Garth had a question about the SAS, which of course the SAS wants to assign, if you get a license, the SAS will assign you a 10 megahertz slice. Now no one knows if that's going to be concurrent, if it's going to be separated, or what is, no one really knows how it's going to be assigned. So with the current radio, of course, if you have a 10 megahertz license and you can't, connect it to anything, you're going to be stuck with the 10 megahertz channel. That's where, like you mentioned, LTE Advanced comes into play with carrier aggregation. Then you can combine two 10 megahertz channels. So now as far as 20 megahertz, you could still use, I think, the upper part from 365 to 37. None of that's changing. So that will always be available to put a 20 megahertz channel in. At least that's from my understanding.
Well, the 10 megahertz channels, those are the PAL licenses. You can buy up to 4 licenses per census check. So you can buy 2 10 megahertz licenses, and you should be able to aggregate them. Unless you're along the coastline where the Navy radar is, or around Earth stations, I can't think that those PAL licenses are going to move very often.
Yeah, I think that's the question, is you don't know for sure if they're going to be sequential or not. Right? There might be other channels in between them.
And I think the effort is to try to make them sequential.
Yeah, that's my thought too. So I think that's really what the question is about, is, or when that happens, right? The current radio, you can do 10 or 20. You can't do CA with this radio. And the next revision of the product will have, probably have CA, but at least the current one, I don't think this will be able to upgrade to LTE now.
All right.
I think that covers basically everything.
Wow. So thank you, everyone, and many of you hung on for a long time. Jesse, Rick, fantastic job. Jesse, thanks for the great content you put together. You can hear a vacuum cleaner in the background. I'm sorry, the cleaning lady is back here. But any event, we'll get this up at a PDF, and we'll post this as a doc to the Facebook page. And Jesse, if you'd make sure to send that to Rick and I, we can get that posted up there. I will stop this recording now, and then we'll send out a link as well to the recording. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a great day. And again, we're not hard to find, so find us if you need anything. Thank you. Bye.